and you're listening to Communities Live on Sheffield Live Radio, 93.2 FM, with me, Susie Casson and T-Boy, and we're joined by Dave Pickersgill from Camera. And you're telling us about the Sheffield's Real Heritage Pubs publication that's downloadable online at the moment. What kind of people do you think are going to be interested in reading it, Dave?
It's interesting, actually. We've had an awful lot of feedback from people who've read it, and the feedback, as I say, has been genuinely been very positive. People like the pub history bits, they like the descriptions, they like the slightly esoteric bits that are in there, sort of quirky bits about Sheffield, which you've got to get in. I think it's the only pub heritage book that mentions Stocksbridge High School, for example. Why it's in there, you'll have to download it and find out. But anyway, who's interested? People interested in local history, people interested in Sheffield, people interested in pubs, people interested in beer. Basically, lots and lots of people. I mean, as I say, the feedback has been positively good. One person actually went through the whole of the first chapter and sent me an Excel spreadsheet of possible typos and possible sentence changes, which was 70 or so lines. It must have taken him hours, but that person was obviously very interested and wanted us to improve and wanted us to get better. The suggestions, I'll take some of them on, some of them I won't, but that's what I need to do. But in the next edition, he'll get an acknowledgement because he's done a bit of work. A friend of mine proofread it and before we went live and found lots of little things that were questions. So lots of people have been involved, which is great, and lots of people are reading it. As I say, the feedback has been really good. We've had mentions in Sheffield newspapers, various local publications like Now Then, Barn Cake, West Yorkshire publication, are doing an article in their next edition, various Camera magazines, The Bar, Donny Drinker, the National magazine, What's Brewing, and obviously Sheffield's Beer Matters. So we've had a reasonable amount of press. But the great thing about it is that in terms of marketing, we've paid, I think our marketing budget so far is £18 something. And that was literally to do some posters for the beer festival when we actually made it available. Those posters will probably become collector's items because so few of them are around. So minimal marketing budget, bit of social media, and the downloads, as I say, have exceeded all expectations. What's actually happening nationally is the Camera National Pub Heritage Group, their next regional guide, which we think will be an updated version of London, will be made available as a download first, and then a paper edition may follow. So they've actually looking at Sheffield and thinking, yeah, this is good. If they can do that, we can do that. And interestingly, on if you take the population of Sheffield and the number of downloads and the population of London to be the same as us, they'd have to get 400,000 downloads, which I don't think is very likely. So.
And the photos are a brilliant sort of snapshot historically, aren't they? It's surprising how things change and you don't notice.
Yeah, I mean, most of the photos are obviously relatively recent because we want, this is what it is. A few of the photos are quite old ones from the sort of 80s, 90s, and they're usually ones that, usually me, I took years ago, and they've been sitting in a drawer, and you pull them out and think, oh, that's interesting, that's changed. I'll scan it, see what it looks like. Got an outside photo of Shakespeare's, for example, on towards Shalesmoor. Outside photo of Shakespeare's 30 years ago. On the right-hand side, there's the archway because there was no coaching in. And you go now, that archway is not there anymore, there's now a room. When it was taken on as a Real Hale Free House some years ago, that archway was turned into a new room quite successfully. And you look at it and you think that's been there for years. It hasn't. It's only been there for about 5 or 6 years. But the old photo, you've got the Wards branding. Some of that is still there. Some of it isn't. The same windows there at the front. So we've got some historical photos. We've got an awful lot of plans, original plans. As mentioned earlier, Sheffield Archives have got an awful lot of stuff in there. And if you know what you're looking for and talk nicely, you can find and see an awful lot of original maps and plans. The Sportsman at Hackenthorpe, the file in the archives has got everything from builder's receipts to letters from the police when it was actually built in the late 1950s. That's an interesting pub, built in the late 1950s and totally unchanged since, which is why it's on the National Inventory of Pub Interiors as a prime example of a 1950s build. Probably the last pub to be built by Works upon Retford Brewery.
Fantastic. So you mentioned that really from the 1970s onwards, pubs started to be modernised and changed. Why do you think so many of Sheffield's pubs managed to remain intact, inside anyway?
I think so many is possibly a bit of an exaggeration. There's got an awful lot that were changed. The ones that are effectively unchanged in the last 30, 40, 50 years tend to be, I know I will be generalising here, tend to be in what were seen as slightly unfashionable areas, shall we say. Fat Cat's actually a prime example of that. It was a Stones pub called the Alma, and the name the Alma came from the battle in the, I think it was the Crimean War in the late 19th century. It's actually called the Kelham Tavern before that, but however. So Kelham Tavern, the Alma, Fat Cat, sold at auction for about £25,000 in 1981 in a very unfashionable area at that time. The word Kelham Island wasn't used, but it was Kelham Island. Kelham Island was little mesters, factories, dirty, and not the sort of place you'd walk around in an evening. Nowadays it's totally changed, but taken on by Dave Wickett, cleaned up, agreed, but it's exactly the same layout as it had in 1981, as it had in probably 1881. You know, separate rooms. You look on the old plans, yes, there was a doorway on the corner, yes, there's the odd doorway being put in, but it is essentially unchanged since Victorian times. So an unfashionable area. Again, looking round, the sportsman I've just mentioned, and Hackenthorpe is not exactly, I'm trying to be polite here. Wyvern in Gleedless, again, that's an unchanged 1960s pub. Richmond, Bath Hotel was under different ownership. That was the in Coop changes in the early 1930s, but it was under different ownership in the 70s and 80s. Tetley's did look after it a bit, and that one has survived as well. So some pub interiors, yes, they have survived. I think now, in the 21st century, there's more of a, this is here, we need to save it, we need to look after it, whereas in the 60s, 70s, it would be the white heat of change, the the technological revolution, the change from cask conditioned beer to this new keg product, and the like. So there was a lot of changes at the time, but I hope we are now more aware of what we've got and want to look after it. One pub that does cause a bit of concern at the moment, Carbrook Hall in Attercliffe. It's got a Grade 2 listed wood-panelled Georgian room, which is actually brilliant. I think I've mentioned this before when I've been here. If it was in York, charge people a fiver to go in and have a look. It was bought by a new owner last March, and it's been closed since the purchase. And did that owner actually know what Grade 2 style listed means? I'm not convinced that the owner did. But it's a little worrying. But I think generally most owners, most pub owners now are a little more aware about heritage. If you've got something that's good, old, keep it, look after it, nurture it so it's there for the future. Don't rip it out and replace it by the latest Formica fad or whatever it is.
Yeah, it's almost like they're mini museums, isn't it?
In a way, that's one way of looking at it. Yeah, I mean, it's the Fat Cat, as I mentioned earlier. If you took that and put it into Beamish Museum in the northeast, or folk industrial type museum, you could say it's unchanged since the time. Crouch Tram Museum have got a inverted commas pub in there, which I think was brought in from somewhere else. Maybe not brick by brick, but certainly piece by piece. But it is a Victorian pub, and they've kept it and they're looking after it. Yeah,
fantastic. So, what do you think Sheffield's pub heritage adds to the city?
Well, it's all part of the whole city scene. People do come to Sheffield for beer tourism. I've talked about beer tourism before, but beer tourism is certainly an underrated local. It's an export or an import, I'm not quite sure. People are coming here and spending money. Every weekend, if you go to Sheffield Station, there are people coming here who get off the train, go on a little circuit of various pubs. They could go south towards the Rutland, the Beer Engine. They could go north towards Kelham Island. They could go into the city centre, go to the Bath, around there. These routes do link together. And a few hours later, then into the Sheffield Tap, get the train home. Having come to Sheffield and spent a reasonable amount of money and interacted with Sheffield people had a good time and they'll come back again a month or two later. There's people who deliberately change train at Sheffield Station. If you're going from, for example, London to Newcastle, let's change train in Sheffield. Pop in the Rutland, pop in the Sheffield Tap, have something to eat, have a nice time for an hour or two, and then carry on. That happens on a daily basis. So beer tourism Sheffield, heritage pubs in Sheffield, they're all part of the picture. I mean, hopefully the Heritage Pub book gives people more information on the pubs they know about, but also puts a few more pubs on the radar as this looks interesting, this could be worth a visit. Greystones up in Ecclesall, for example. If you go in there, there's lots of quite old wood panelling. Around the back towards the toilets, there's definitely a 1930s little Arrow Gents sign that's worth a quick look at. So that, you can go there for Formage beer, you can go there for a gig, but it's also worth a quick look for in terms of pub heritage.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. So, unfortunately, quite a few pubs are closing, as we all know. What do you see as the main threats to Sheffield's pub heritage in the future?
I think I've already alluded to lack of awareness, which I think is becoming less of a problem, although cardboard cola, as mentioned, is a bit of an issue. The main threats, it's like every pub, really. If nobody goes, the pub will close. I mean, that's what will happen eventually. It depends who the owners are. It depends on the rental system. It depends how the people who run it are getting paid and funded. All those factors are in there. If a pub is owned by a large multinational, effectively property company, it's probably got less chance of surviving than if it's owned by half a dozen people or a dozen people in a cooperative. The Gardener's Rest, for example, I'm now convinced will survive for years to come. It's owned by a large cooperative. 30 years ago, it was owned by John Smith's Brewery, and they did sell it on. They basically, I think, wanted to get rid of it because it wasn't making any money. And now it's part of the growing Kelham Island scene, where new bars are actually opening. The old workshop on Hick Street opened a few months ago. There's other new bars opening down there, but again, that's all led effectively by the Fat Cat in 1981, Dave Wickett.
Yeah, and the new winter sports centre where the ski village was told, aren't they?
Yeah, if that takes off. Where the ski village, if that takes off, just literally at the bottom of the hills where the Gardener's Rest is and the old workshop, and then you've got all the other pubs on Kelham Island. So that area of town is booming. One slight problem around there is the Old Stones Brewery, which is derelict at the moment. Planning permission has been obtained for it to be demolished. That was 2 or 3 years ago. It's an eyesore at the moment. It should be demolished, but I don't know who owns it. And I think they're just waiting till they can build a new block of flats, but that's...
Wait and see.
Wait and see.
So that's brilliant. So Sheffield's Real Heritage Pubs is available to download free.
It's download free, www.sheffieldcamera.org.uk/RHP.
Great.
Real Heritage Pubs /RHP. And, you're just going to Google and put Sheffield Pub Heritage or Sheffield Heritage Pubs and you'll find it.
Fantastic.
We put it on the homepage of our website, and we'd like people to download it so we actually know how many copies are out there. Yeah. It's a PDF though, so you can do whatever you want with it. So you can read it on your phone, you can read it on anything really.
Fantastic. Oh, good luck with that. Sounds fantastic.
Okay.
Can we just finally ask, if someone's thinking of joining CAMRA, what do we do?
All sorts of different ways. I mean, again, the easiest way to do is join CAMRA on Google and it will take you straight to the membership page. So that's the easy way, or join at a beer festival. All the CAMRA beer festivals have membership stands. They always offer some sort of incentive. It could be free beer, it could be 15 months instead of a year, whatever. There'll be some sort of incentive. I think we had, I can't remember the exact numbers, something like 50 or 60 people joined CAMRA at the Sheffield Beer Festival last October, which is great. Some people join, they'll take... offers, beer reductions at various pubs. They'll take advantage of various fringe benefits that CAMRA, like any sort of organisation, has. If you go on National Express, you can get reduced price tickets, for example. Some people will get involved, and there's lots to be involved in. We talked earlier about Sheffield Beer Festival, but start thinking about it. It's not just serving beer. If anybody's a forklift truck driver or drives vans, very helpful. Got glass washing, social media, counting money, talking to people. There's all sorts of jobs which have to be done. One or two people recently have been working at beer festivals, put them on their CV, and using them as stepping stones as part of the CV. To you build up your CV, you go for jobs, and it's all in there. If you've been involved in managing a beer festival that's got a turnover of £70,000 or £80,000, excuse me, you know what you're doing. So there are jobs there. Nationally, there's a Great British Beer Festival in London every year at Olympia. Lots of CAMRA members go down there for anything from a day to some people go for a fortnight. So it's all the setup beforehand, the beer festival itself, and afterwards I tend to go for a couple of days, but it's free accommodation and a nice luxury coach back to the accommodation at midnight. So there's lots to be done. People tend to be fairly friendly, and so join.